Thanks for joining us on episode 1583 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Mitchell Osmond, and I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the ability to find your legacy is key, and one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend Scott Maderer. The word masculinity is under attack. We heard the phrase toxic masculinity, which, by the way, I would like to just call immature masculinity. Masculinity in its essence is not toxic, but we need wise, compassionate, loving, caring men in the home. For example, we know that 1 in 4 kids today are going to grow up without a father in the home.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world. In today's podcast episode, I interview Mitchell Osmond. I asked Mitchell about how he's driven to help men succeed in business and in marriage. I also asked Mitchell about how men can be leaders without being toxic. And Mitchell also shares with you how important it is to break free from self-sabotaging beliefs. I have a great book that's been out for a while now called Inspired Living. Assemble the puzzle of your calling by mastering your time, your talent, and your treasures. You can find out more about that book over at inspiredlivingbook.com. It'll take you to a page where there's information and you can sign up to get some mailings about it as well as purchase a copy there. I'd love to see you get a copy and share with me how it impacted your world. Mitchell Osmond is an advisor, a leadership consultant, an online influencer, and a podcaster. He is dedicated to helping high-performing men achieve success where it matters most, at home, in their health, and in their mindset. Mitchell guides executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals to bridge the gap between career success and personal fulfillment, ensuring they thrive in both their business and their marriages. Through his coaching, courses, speaking engagements, and podcasts, The Dad Nation, he teaches high performers how to reclaim their home, health, and happiness while enhancing their career success. His mission is simple: help high-performing leaders win in every area of life and create a lasting legacy. Welcome to the show, Mitchell.
Thank you, my friend. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So I came on your show a while back too, and I really enjoyed my time there. I learned a little bit about you from just talking to you and spending some time with you. I shared some things in the intro about Dad Nation and the work that you're doing, but I also know that the intro is never the whole story. So talk a little bit more about your journey and what's brought you to the point where this is the work you're doing, this is the message you're putting out in the world.
Yeah, I love that question, and I get it often. Some people, a lot of people ask, what was your turning point? For me, I would say there was a couple catalytic moments in my journey. The two, and there's one, which is the fight, and the second one was the funeral. Okay, so the first one was a fight, and I was in the kitchen, or I was in the living room with my wife. We're sitting on the couch, and man, it all hit the fan, and we had a big fight. And a fight started out, it was over money. We were really struggling at the time. That morphed into a fight about me not being present and checking out, and it kept on spiraling. And if your listeners are married, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
It just 13 weeks ago on Thursday at 2:22 p.m. Not that ever happens.
Yeah. But at that time, we had been married for just about 3 years, and it was 3 years of struggling. And this fight was our rock bottom. We fought all the time, but this one was different. For the first time in my life, I felt like I couldn't fix it. Deep down, I knew that if something didn't change, then this marriage would probably be over. Now, to give you some context, is I was in a leadership position, a senior leadership position and I always had been. But I was let go from that position, and it caused me to go into a spiral of depression. I gained 60 pounds. We were in debt over $100,000. I was medicating with drugs and alcohol, just trying to cope, and obviously dangerously close to divorce. And as I say, I was checked out, stressed out, burned out, and I couldn't make any sense of it because I had seen success professionally in growing organizations and leadership team and building leadership teams, but I couldn't seem to figure out my life personally. Why was it that I was so powerful at work, but powerless at home? And maybe your listeners have been there in some way or another, and to give you more context, I came from a dysfunctional upbringing, and I had a non-existent relationship with my father. Alcoholism, drugs, crime were littered throughout my family, and I was caught in the middle of it all. And I thought that I had that figured out, but then when I got married, the wounds from my childhood began to bleed into my marriage. And I could hear I could hear my father's voice in mine. I could hear his words in mine. And I kept getting pulled back into it. And I kept losing my mind, and I kept drinking, and I kept whatever. I knew I could be a better man, but I just didn't know how. So the second point of this journey was a week later. I was at a funeral, and I was a lead pastor at the time, and I was actually singing at this funeral. The minister at the funeral was of this wealthy philanthropic man, and he had helped tons of people. It was like 2,000 people at this funeral. And the minister asked this question as he was wrapping up. He said, "Are you living a life worthy of imitation? If you were to die tomorrow, would you be proud of the legacy that you left?" And Scott, by the time I strapped on my guitar and tried to choke out the last lyrics of the song, I could barely do it, because I thought at that time, man, if this was my funeral, no one would be saying, "Man, he inspired me to have an amazing marriage." Nobody would say he inspired me to get into shape, or he inspired me how to love my wife well, or to be a model of self-control. They would probably say he struggled, and then it was over. You see, at this funeral, people still told stories about this man. And that story was filled with incredible chapters, right? And that's what people do at funerals. They tell stories because that's all they have left. And I was determined at the end of that funeral that I would begin to write my story, to rewrite my story, right? To write new chapters, because at that point, my childhood was kind of a sad story. My marriage was it was a struggling story. So I committed that. I said, when I go home, this is it. It ends with me. And I'm going to end this generational curse in my family with me. And yeah, basically, I knew that if I wanted different results, I needed to do something differently. We know that, right? That's the old adage, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting something different. So I surrounded myself with men who were living where I wanted to go, men who my ceiling was their floor. And they taught me everything I needed to know. I hired coaches and a therapist and a fitness trainer and all those different things. But really, these men surrounded me and believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And then within a year and a half, we paid off $100,000 in debt, completely restored our marriage. I lost the 60 pounds and restored my health. And I was clean of substances and distractions. I was calm, content, and confident. And so that was 9 years ago. And because of the fact that I'd been in leadership positions, everyone kind of knew that they saw what was going on. They're like, "What's going on, man? How are you losing this weight? You and Sam seem so happy. How'd you guys get out of debt? This is incredible." And so I started helping my friends, my brothers around me, and helping them get out of debt, helping them grow closer to their wives, help them lose weight and all those things. Then after a while, one of my buddies said, "Hey, man, if you really want to have an impact, you should start a podcast and start sharing your knowledge with the world." And 18 months ago, a year and a half ago, I launched the Dad Nation podcast and essentially just started teaching the principles that I've learned over the last 10 years. And then within 8 or 9 months, I had people from around North America messaging me, asking me, "Hey, could you coach me, or could you sell me something? Could you teach me to do what you did?" And then over the last 10 months or so, I've created a 6-figure online coaching practice where I help high-performing men reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness. And that's my 3 pillars are marriage, fitness, and mindset. And that's really what I'm doing at the end of the day, Scott, is taking my trash and turning it into treasure. because I believe the Lord redeems all things. And for me, this is his redemption plan through me. So that's how I got here, man.
A couple of things came to mind. First off, I think for a lot of men, we can relate to that big fight like you're talking about, or that blowout fight. However, I wanted to ask you too, with some of the men you work with and with some of the situations you find, have you also found where what's really going on in the marriage is not the fight, but the lack of the fight? You understand what I mean? It's the silences, the not communication, the not actually having the knockdown blowout. Mm-hmm. And how does that show up?
Mm. Yeah. So I think what you're talking about is a lack of communication. And yeah, that's huge. We know that in the United States, 70% of all divorces are initiated by women. And in scenarios where the wife has an education or is a high earner, that number jumps to 90% of divorces are initiated by women. And the vast majority of those reasons are because of a lack of connection. And most of them are about an emotional connection. Because men, and if you have men who are listening, if you're anything like me, you have 4 emotions, right? Maybe you're mad, you're sad, you're happy, or stressed, you're whatever, right? Pick your 4, but it really doesn't get more than that. And the challenge is women need to be connected to emotionally, right? But before they can become physical. And then men are the opposite, right? We need to feel connected physically before we can connect emotionally. And that's part of the reason, right? So I spend a lot of my time teaching men how to connect with their wives on a deeper level, on an emotional level, how to engage them in conversation, how to show up, be fully present, because we think that our wives are looking for perfection, but what they're actually looking for is presence. You know what I mean? Are you here? Man, Scott, sometimes one of the most common phrases I say to my clients are, be where your feet are. That's it. Wherever your feet are, show up there, not on your phone. Put your phone away, turn the TV off, you name it. And so we have a lot of different frameworks and teachings around how exactly to connect with your wife in a way that she feels seen and heard and safe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things that I think I wanted to call out from your story is the fact that there was a period where you didn't believe in yourself, but you found a way to do what I call borrowing belief. If coaches in this case, or other people, men in your life, mastermind groups, a mentor, shows up in different ways for different people, but it's the idea of sometimes when we can't believe in ourselves, one of the ways forward is to find a source of borrowed belief, somebody else who believes in you, that you can borrow from it until you begin to believe in yourself. Do you think, how did that show up for you, and how does that show up now in the work that you do?
Yeah, it's huge, right? Community is massive. And I created something called the Dad Nation Coalition, which is essentially my clients who come together for this community of like-minded brotherhood. It's a like-minded group of men who are on the same mission. And the reason why is because you can have motivation. You can have a lot of motivation. You can have grit. You can have all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you're going to get tired, right? And you're going to lose sight. And you need men to hold you up sometimes. So having those men around you not only give you this, like you said, not only encourage you, they show you what's possible because they're living it. They give you the tools that you need to have to get to that point, right? And then they encourage you when you need to get to that point, because it can be exhausting. What we're talking about is deep mental and emotional work, especially in the context of marriage. And usually I do a lot of mindset coaching as well. And let's be real, at the end of the day, marriage coaching is really just mindset coaching, is practicing mindfulness, being aware of your emotions, what you're saying or what you're not saying, healthy boundaries, attachment styles, origin stories, all those different things, right? So community is massive. And that's why I did that in the very beginning. And that's, I think, a large reason why I was able to accomplish what I was able to, and also the speed in which I did it. A year and a half. I felt like I had a cheat code because, Scott, what I did is I reached out and I said, who's the most financially successful person I know? Who's in the best shape that I know? Who has the best marriage that I know? I took all the problems I had and I said, who within 1 degree of separation is the most inspiring person in that area? And I'm going to reach out and say, hey man, would you be willing to just grab a coffee like once a month and just give me any mentorship or tips or anything you want? And that those 5 relationships blossomed into something amazing and helped me speed up, exponentiate that process. So yeah, community is huge.
You also mentioned, as you were talking, a little bit about your belief and your faith and how that intersected with this. Talk a little bit about how the journey you were on affected your faith and how your faith journey affected the journey you were on, that kind of feedback loop between our faith and our life.
Yeah, it was interesting because I had spent so much of my life with a sort of, and I mean, the language is strong, but a bit of a victim mentality. God, why did you let this happen to me? Mm-hmm. Why me? Why did you give me a dad who didn't love me, right? Or why did you give me a sister who had Grand Theft Auto charges and stole from our family and almost burned our house down? Why did you give me this? Why was this abuse in my family? Why was this trauma in my family? And I grew up with a lot of anger toward the Lord. And then at one point he had said, I'm doing this in you because I have a greater plan for you, a purpose that's beyond something that you can understand. But the problem was because I was so used to the environment that I was in, and I was always told, you're not the smart one in the family. Your older sister is the smart one. So you're going to be just like your dad. And so that was just spoken over my life, most of my life. And so I got to a point where, when the healing took place and the Lord would put people in my life, like Scott, it was crazy, man. I would be at like McDonald's, or I would be at like the superstore, or it could have been in church. It could have been anywhere, like at least once a year for at least 10 years, where somebody would come up and share a prophetic word with me. And they would say, you're called to something great, to impact thousands of men by your testimony and what the Lord has done through you. I'm like, what are you talking about? Let me eat my Big Mac. Get out of my face. Because at the time I was so angry, right? And I didn't understand. And so I'd had these people sharing, these random people sharing these prophetic words, and the vision, it was always the same thing. And I had no idea because I had no self-belief. And it wasn't until I really did that deep work to understand and really seek in the Lord. And like, what does this mean? How can you turn this around for me? And so unfortunately, none of that really made sense until I had that blow up with my wife, where it was all like, it got really rock bottom. And then I hit the funeral. And then that question just unlocked something for me. It's interesting in that moment when I was wrestling with that, am I living a life worthy of imitation? I was wrestling with that question. And then the Lord began to stir something up in my heart, because at that time I was in ministry. I'm jumping all over the timeline of my life, but at that time I was in ministry. And a large part of my ministry was just to people who knew God, right? Men who knew the Lord, which was great. And I think there's a time and a place for that. But the Holy Spirit began to say, I'm calling you to reach men who would otherwise never step into this building. And so in order to do that, I need you to do some extra work. And yeah, that was the journey, the faith journey, and how that intertwined. And I went on this healing journey. The Lord helped me see what he was preparing me for. And also having to prepare to step out of that vocational ministry and into a ministry that was totally foreign to me, in the sense of most of my clients didn't know the Lord, versus when I was a pastor, everyone did, right? And so cool to help me to be able to share my faith along with the coaching and intertwine that. Now, a lot of my clients obviously know the Lord as well, but it is a cool ministry that's come out of that.
Mm-hmm. What do you see as some of the challenges that happen? Because you've been in the ministry environment, you've worked with men there, and now you're working in the coaching. And like you just said, some of the folks that come to you, it's not necessarily because of their faith or because of a faith that it's other things that are bringing them to you. What do you see as some of the common obstacles or challenges that show up, regardless of whether you were in the quote church setting or now in the secular setting, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a great question, Scott. And I think a lot of people we have to go back to our wiring. And a lot of people they misunderstand love, really. Let's go back even more. They think that their spouse is supposed to make them happy, to complete them. We believe this lie that Hollywood tells us, that love is supposed to feel good. And so we're set up for this with this lie. So we have all these uncommunicated expectations. But then when we talk about our wiring in the context of a man and a wife when they get married, let's break down masculine, like a masculine essence versus a feminine essence. Like a masculine essence, in its true essence, is driven by mission, right? Accomplishments. It's driven by excellence. It's driven by goals, all those different things. It's assertive. It's decision making. The feminine essence is much more emotional, and it's intuitive. It values nurturing relationships, all those things. So entirely different drivers, right? And so a lot of my clients are high performing men, VPs, CEOs, whatever, positions of leadership, and their job is to create systems and strategies and produce more profit, income, whatever. And they have tactical, tangible results. And they're rewarded for it. And they're rewarded for their masculinity, a lot of senses in those, because they have a strong mission. Hey, by Q4, this is what we need to see. But that's not the way a woman works, right? That's not the way your wife works. So when I say men feel powerful at work and powerless at home, the problem is they come home and they continue to treat their wife like the employee. And their date nights end up feeling like board meetings with wine, right? And so it's understanding that like the same rules at work don't necessarily apply at home. And so maybe your wife doesn't care about your strategies or the system or the whatever, and she just wants to talk. And not even with any kind of goal, like not even a subject, just to talk for the sake of talking. When I learned that, it blew my mind. I'm like, you mean to tell me there's literally no point to this conversation? You just want to, for the sake of talking. Or I coach a lot of men in a woman's 3 basic needs, and that's to feel seen, to feel heard, and to feel safe, right? And we could break those down if you want. But at the end of the day, a lot of men realize that their wife hasn't felt heard. They haven't felt seen, they haven't felt heard, and they haven't felt safe in many ways for many years. And so at the end of the day, we must understand that our masculine essence, the things that make us a man, so to speak, and the things that make our wives a woman are very different, and we have different motivations. And there's a lot more to it. Like we could talk about, our origin stories, like where we came from, or love languages, or attachment styles, and all those different things. But at the end of the day, the big disconnect is you're speaking red and she's speaking blue, and you're totally just bumping heads, right? And so if we could understand how, and I'll often ask my clients, I'm like, I want you to talk to your wife. And after I teach them about seen, heard, and safe, I have a series of questions. And having you ask, what does it look like for me to make you feel seen today? Or how can I make you feel more heard in this family? Or how can I make you feel safe in the 4 ways, which is relationally, physically, and emotionally, and financially safe? Are there any ways that you're feeling unsafe in this relationship, and how can I restore that? And dude, when they ask that question, like the wives, it just blows their mind. And then the waterworks come, and then I say, hey, take what she says and start implementing it. I don't care, man. Create a strategic plan, create a metric around it if you need to. Turn it into a mission.
We can turn it into a task or a mission, and all of a sudden it's, yay, this is fun now.
Exactly. And then she's going to feel seen, heard, and safe. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. My wife and I have gone through a very challenging time ourselves. And some of the things that I've learned, like, for instance, my wife literally has learned this, and it's something I tell her it's to train me, is how it is. So she can come to me and say, I just need you to listen.
Yes.
And that just means I just shut up and listen. I'm not supposed to solve the problem. I'm not supposed to give advice. I'm just supposed to shut up and listen.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I can do that because I know the rules now. I know what my expectation is. And the other one, is, hey, I just need a hug right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She just needs a hug. It is some of that. She understands how to communicate to me, and I understand how to communicate to her, and works both ways. Because sometimes too, the wife has to learn and the man has to learn, and then then it's a positive feedback loop as opposed to a negative one or a destructive one.
Yeah, and you just got a great question that can really help that specific scenario for a man is because I know for me, like a lot of times I would come home from work and I spent the last 8-10 hours fixing things. And that's what leaders do.
I'm in that mode.
Yeah, 100%. So you come home and the kids are screaming and your wife is like stressed and she starts talking and you're like, okay, fix it. I got to fix this, obviously. Right. Mm-hmm. So when she would start talking, I'd say, just 1 second. I have one quick question for you. Is this a conversation where you want me to fix something? Or is this a conversation that you just want me to listen? Well, like, how can I best serve you right now? And honestly, man, like she'll give you the answer. She'll be like, actually, I just want you to listen. And bro, the weight just comes up. You're like, oh, all right, game on. What if she's like, actually, I really need you to help me with this? You're like, okay, game on. Let's go. I can help with that.
I can do that.
It just brings so much clarity. And she appreciates it as well because it says, hey, I'm listening and I want to serve you. I want to love you well. Right? That's a simple question.
Yeah. It's by asking that question that now my wife just prompts. She pre-answers that question. You know what I mean? She'll tell me, okay, this is not a solve it conversation. Okay, got it.
Love it.
I'm just supposed to listen. And other times it's like, nope. I'm supposed to help and provide a solution or help out or do something more active, quote unquote. Not that listening's not active, but it can, to me, just listening feels there's got to be more to this. There's got to be a point to it.
Exactly. And you know what it feels like when you hear your wife, and this is not meant to disrespect at all. It's just meant to highlight how crazy it feels for us men who are listening. But when your wife is having a hard day and she's talking about it and she's like overwhelmed or frustrated or whatever, and she's not looking for a solution, it's literally like standing in front of a house that's on fire, and you have a hose from a fire hydrant, and you could just turn it on anytime you want. You're holding it. You're like, I can turn it on. I can put this fire. Okay. You just gotta keep that hose closed and watch it burn. So it's normal to struggle with that.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about how, especially for men, the idea of we will have an area like business or corporate world or whatever it is that we're engaged in, and we find great success there. Everyone looks at it and goes, dude, you're so successful. Higher income, high earning, whatever it is, right? These different external measures of success. And we'll find it in those areas of our life and yet struggle so much on the personal side with the kids or with the wife or with the marriage. You see a lot of successful men that I'm on my third wife. Okay. So you see success in one area and so much struggle in another. What are some of how can we not see that situation? What advice do you have or strategies do you have to help men deal with that split?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I tell you what, Scott, I think a large part of it is there's two reasons why this happens. Number one is we don't actually understand what success looks like for us. Like we don't have clarity. Like what does success look like for Scott? What does success look like for Mitchell? Because we look to so many other places. What is my neighbor? What are they successful in? Or my brother-in-law or whatever. So we don't have clarity. The second reason is it's harder to define, right? Like I can tell when I'm being successful at work because I get a performance bonus or I get a I got a raise, or I got a whatever. Very simple. I get a paycheck at the end of the week, or whatever your context is. And it's very tactical. Okay, I did this thing, I get this reward. But now I come home, and you're not like, when you come into the door, your 6-year-old isn't, hey, daddy, here are 7 reasons why I think you're an effective father. You know what I mean? No one's telling you. It's not.
I'm just picturing a performance review meeting with your 6-year-old in my head. All of a sudden, it's like, how would that go?
Exactly, right? Or like, how do you quantify if you're gaining or growing in your self-confidence? Or even losing weight, for example, is tough unless you're super diligent about tracking the metrics. And so it's really tangible, like seeing success at work. But when we come home, it's way more intangible. And so we struggle in that environment. Remember, given our masculine essence and how we're wired. And for me, the biggest thing that I think is important for men to understand is that we have to begin with the end in mind, right? And so Stephen Covey, in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, chapter 2 is called Begin with the End in Mind. Napoleon Hill is begin with the end in mind. It's always, we have to get clarity at the end result. What does a successful life look like for me? Or for example, my situation was, what does a life look like that's worthy of imitation? That was my turning point. And a lot of times with some of my clients, I'll walk them through a eulogy writing exercise, right? Where I'll have them literally write out the eulogy that their wife would write for them, or that their kids would write for them in an ideal situation, and maybe what they would write today. And at the end of the day, that because those 2 points are really where the tension lies about the man or the person we are right now, the family life we have, the physical health we have, all those different things, and the person we know that we could be, or the man we want to be. And in that gap is where we carry those questions and those anxieties of like, what if I could just figure it out? And so some things like that we do to begin with the end in mind, and just really craft a clear idea of what matters the most. And I'll often say to men, you have to determine what gets your automatic yeses, right? Because when you know what gets your automatic yes, given everything else it gets a lot easier, right? And understanding that every moment you give something or someone a yes, something or someone else is getting a no. Mm-hmm. The moment you say yes to that board meeting, your wife and your kids are getting a no. Understand that, right? Because there's no way to stretch time. And so let's get clear on what gets our yeses above everything else. And let's get clear on what's okay with getting our no's, right? So essentially, we have a lot of conversation around what do you want? Because Scott, 90% of the guys I ask that question to, what do you want? The answer is, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what do you mean? You're running 7-figure companies. You have a team of 80 people serving you. You don't know what you want? I have no idea. So getting clarity on that. And so there's something that I've built called the Prime Success Filter. And essentially what it is, it's a series of statements that you as a man can ask yourself or to make to help you define success for you. So I'll know I'm being successful when ... right? And that could be, I'll know I'm being successful when I can stop scrolling on my phone and be fully present with my wife once we put the kids to bed. I'll know I'm being successful when I have this much money in the bank, or I have the house paid off, or whatever. But you have to understand what success looks like for you and not let other people define it. And so the Prime acronym is essentially the system that you use to create these statements. So P stands for personal, right? It has to be your definition of success, not your parents, your in-laws, your neighbors. The second one is relevant. It has to align with what truly matters to you now, right? The third one is intentional. You have to use it to choose and to act on purpose. And the fourth one is measured. So it must give you a clear test for every decision, right? Again, going back with the yes and the no. And the fifth one is evolving. This thing has to grow with you as you grow. And so then you ask that question, I'll know I'm being successful when, and you run it through that Prime framework. And if it gets a If it makes sense through all those, then you write that statement down. And you have 4 or 5 guiding statements. And then if I'll stick these on the wall or put them on my background, whatever, it keeps me focused on what matters to me and no one else. And it keeps me focused on moving forward instead of being complacent and drifting. And it keeps me from only focusing on work. Because ideally, in that situation, those statements involve your family, your faith, some of those areas, not just your finances and your career. And so it's just reading those once, even just once a month, is a great alignment tool. And it stops you from getting caught in that trap. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. It does. And I think it helps too. It helps break free from limiting success to just those areas that, like you said, it takes the things that are less measurable or less coherent and helps you make them coherent and clear.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So, Mitchell, I've got a few questions that I like to ask all of my guests. But before I ask you those, is there anything else about the work you do or this message that you're sharing that you'd like to share?
Oh, man. It would just honestly just be an encouragement to your listeners, because so often in our world today, I feel like the word masculinity is under attack. We heard the phrase toxic masculinity, which, by the way, I would like to just call immature masculinity. Masculinity in its essence is not toxic, but we need wise, compassionate, loving, caring men in the home. We know, so for example, we know that 1 in 4 kids today are going to grow up without a father in the home. We know that 63% of youth suicides come from fatherless homes. 90% of homeless and runaway children come from fatherless homes. 85% of kids with behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes. 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. And so the truth is that your family needs you, your spouse needs you, your kids need you, right? And so I just want to encourage the men who are listening and the wives who are listening that are married to men. Go all in. Go all in. And you'll hear me, if you listen to the Dad Nation podcast, you'll hear me say it at the beginning and the end of every single episode. When the dad gets better, the whole family wins. Because at the end of the day, you're responsible, right? And that's a part of taking leadership in the home, is like understanding that you're the blueprint. And so your kids are going to follow your steps. They're not always going to do what you say, but you better believe they're going to do what you do. So that would just be a little encouragement for you. You matter. And this world needs you, and this family and your family needs you.
So my brand is Inspired Stewardship, and I run things through that lens of stewardship. And yet I've discovered over the years, that's one of those words that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So when you hear the word stewardship, what does that word mean to you?
Yeah, man, I'm reminded of that scripture that says every good and perfect gift comes from above, from our Heavenly Father, who does not change like the shifting shadows. And for me, every gift is from the Lord. Everything we have is from the Lord. And He's always asking us. We know this in parables and teachings. How are you fostering? How are you stewarding this gift I've given you in your time and your talent, your treasure, right? And so it's not just, for me, it's not just about money. I think a lot of people think about money, financial stewardship, but I think about, man, like, for example, one of the times, another point early on in our marriage, we had a big fight and with my wife, and I was yelling at her, and I saw fear in her eyes, and she was backed up against the wall. And the Holy Spirit said to me in that moment, "She is my daughter before she's your wife, and she is a gift I've given you, and I can take her away at any point. How are you loving this daughter I've trusted you with?" And so when I think about stewardship, I think about, man, stewardship is like how I treat my wife, how I treat my son, how I treat my finances, how I grow my business, how I lead other men, all those different things. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this is my favorite question that I like to ask everybody. Imagine for a moment that I invented this magic machine. And with this machine, I was able to take you from where you are today and transport you into the future, maybe 150, maybe 250 years. And through the power of this machine, you were able to look back and see your entire life, see all of the connections, see all of the ripples, see all of the impacts you've left. What impact do you hope you've left in the world?
Man, I love that question. I would hope that there would be a few people that would say, he helped me in my marriage. That guy started that organization that trained and taught men and their sons how to be better men, how to love their wives well, how to succeed and be faithful in what the Lord has given them in their time, talent, and treasure. That my life is better, that I've ended this generational curse in my life because of this organization that he started in a couple 100 years from now. Because at the end of the day, that's the business that I work in, is a lot is these breaking these generational cycles, right? And so for me, I think 150, 200 years, a couple generations have gone by. I'd love for people to be saying that.
So what's on the roadmap? What's coming next as you continue on your journey?
Yeah, so continuing to grow. I have a community called the Dad Nation Coalition, which is, like I said, a community of like-minded men who get together to grow in their fitness and their mindset and their marriage. And so what's in the journey, man, or what's in the future is just more of that. I tell men, or tell people all the time, I do 3 things and I never get bored of these 3 things. And I don't want to do any more than these 3 things. And that's content, courses, and coaching. So the content is the Dad Nation podcast. The courses is my online programs that help men. And then the coaching is, of course, connecting with men with coaching calls and stuff. And so just more and more of that, man. I have a mission to help 500,000 men and these curses and their families and to help them become better men, husbands, and fathers. So my goal is to reach that 500,000 mark.
Awesome. So you can find out more about Mitchell over at dadnationco.com. Of course, I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. Mitchell, anything else you'd like to share with the listener?
Yeah. Thanks for asking, Scott. I would say if you're listening to this and this has resonated with you, I have a free gift that I'd love to give your listeners today, Scott. And it's just called the Connection Code. And it's 50 of my favorite questions that I use all the time with men to spark more fun and create more intimacy in your marriage. And so if you feel more like roommates lately than soulmates, or like I said earlier, your date nights feel like board meetings, then you can download that gift. I'll give it to you, Scott, to put in the show notes below. It's real simple. And then you can pull these questions out on date nights or after you put the kids down. And I promise you, these questions are strategically designed to draw out your wife and to help her connect with you on a deeper level emotionally and spark more fun and intimacy in your marriage. So that's just for you for listening today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favor. Go over to inspiredstewardship.com/iTunes rate, all one word, iTunes rate. It'll take you through how to leave a rating and review and how to make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get every episode as it comes out in your feed. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.